Welcome, dear viewers, to a new episode of Dialogue Horizon. In this episode, as we promised 2 weeks ago when we were talking about the Horn of Africa, we will continue on this issue because it is still the Horn of Africa is still hot and it is full of activities and developing activities every now and then. I'm glad to continue on this issue, but I am also glad to host in this episode one of our distinguished Sudanese expatriates in America. Is Professor Bakri Jack in Long Island, Brooklyn, New York University. He is specialized in public policy and international affairs. And he lived in this Horn of Africa for some time. He knows all about the Horn of Africa. Professor Bakri Jack, we are happy to have you with us in this episode, together with our friend, our engineer, who is right in the middle of the arena of the political, can I call it upheaval, in the country these days, engineer Muhammad Farouk Salman. Both of them will definitely will cover this important subject at this important critical time in the Horn of Africa. Welcome, Professor Bakri Jack. I'm happy to start the question of the Horn of Africa just to enlighten the viewers about the Horn of Africa. What is the Horn of Africa? Why is it the Horn of Africa? And why it is all of the time full of activities and it is always hot in different parts of the Horn itself. So tell us about the Horn of Africa. What are the countries that constitute the Horn of Africa?
I would like to thank you so much for having me tonight. It's an honor, and I feel delighted to be back home and speak to your viewers. And I appreciate the nice introduction about my credentials. That's really deeply appreciated. I think, generally speaking, one of the main issues when it comes down to when we talk about geographic areas, we tend to, use names. Sometimes people say like Sub-Saharan Africa, and I tend to ask, what do we mean by Sub-Saharan Africa? But these terms sometimes are used to mean a specific block of geography, but other times it could mean to use some specific cultural elements. So straight to your question, when we say the Horn of Africa in terms of geography, we talk about Djibouti, Eritrea, Sudan, Ethiopia, and of course,
Somalia.
and Somalia, including what to be now Somaliland, which is still part of Somalia, and there is some disputes. So in terms of geography, I think the area is clear, it's distinct. There are some connections, I mean, in terms of cultural and ethnic connection between this region. I don't have to mention anything that you don't have to go far. If you look at Sudan, we have a lot of ties between Sudan and Eritrea and Sudan and Ethiopia. There are lots of ties between Eritrea and Ethiopia in terms of ethnic connections, inclusivity. You will find sometimes people in the same area. You go to Eritrea, you'll find Afar in Ethiopia, you'll find them in Eritrea. You go to Djibouti, you'll find Afar in Djibouti, you'll find them in Eritrea. So there is really ethnic, and I think in terms of history, before these modern borders, people used to live in the land. So the concept of Horn of Africa now, in terms of geography, include all these countries, but also in terms of culture, it means like this distinct group of people living in this land, and they have shared history, and there is also a lot of interconnected issues in terms of economic needs, in terms of political interference historically. All of these countries happen to either fight each other or have some interference in each other's politics. Maybe we can cover that as we go on.
As we go on, yes. But also this area, this Horn of Africa, the countries which you mentioned, all these countries are also featured. They feature some kind of hardships, poverty, diseases, and civil wars. And so, what does this mean? Can you attribute this to the mixed culture or to the strategic aims of the first world, the Americans or the Russians or whatever? Anyhow.
I think if we go back to any decent writings about the development issues, using culture as a way to describe the reason why specific groups of people couldn't actually develop is one of those myths, and now it's now completely dumped. No one is going to say, certain group of people are not developed because of their distinct culture. So I think it's a combination of factors. Definitely, we have to admit the idea of nation state is new to this area. Many of these countries used to be land, and then European came in and they decided to divide the land among them. And we know that at some point through the First World War, Second World War, and eventually we ended up having countries born out of this division of these lands. So the natural borders has never been actually raised. We created new political borders after creating these states. So one thing that you could point to immediately is building this idea of nation state out of an assumption that you bring different people from different backgrounds and you put them in a place and you call it a country, and you imagine they will figure out a way to live together. So that's one main reason why we have these issues all over the place. So, but if we go even further, the idea of nation building after the independence in Sudan, Ethiopia, of course, had never been colonized officially, but that's a whole complicated issue we can talk about. But you go to Somalia, 1950s. Eritrea was in this, federation situation in 1959. So if you think about the idea of building a nation state in any of these countries, it's a project that has been in the making for the last 50 years. And you can't really conclude and say by far it failed, but we can say so far there are signs of failure, and those signs of failure can be seen in famines, civil wars, in destruction, waste of lives. A lot of young people's lives are wasted. If I have to even think, do we even know how many people died in these wars in Ethiopia, like war between Eritrea and Ethiopia for between 59 to 91, wars between South Sudan and Sudan, which is now part of the Horn of Africa itself, war between Somalis, if you think about maybe one day if we have data, we might actually come to the conclusion that maybe 10, 15 million lives are lost in these wars. So there are really lots of factors that could be responsible for why we have this upheaval that you like to point to.
Okay, that's very good. Okay, if we go to Engineer Mohammed Farouk, Salman Mohammed Farouk, yes, Professor, he pointed out very critical, very issues which could be the reasons for the situations in these countries of Horn Africa, whether they were hard hit by famines or wars, by diseases. So do you agree that can a federal system solve the matter between these countries? Actually, there is a lot of diversities in this Horn of Africa. Those diversities were not reflected in the political demarcation of the borders. That's what the professor is saying. So what can you add to this argument?
Yes, thank you for hosting me on this episode again, and it's a pleasure for me to be with Bakri. I guess long time since the university activities we never appeared together, maybe just in some social media activities.
He's my mentor. That's what you want to say.
Yeah, sure. If we look at how we look at the Horn of Africa and how we look at these states, as Bakri is saying, the issue of nation building is still an issue that not sorted yet, and we can see there is some symptoms that repeated in all of these countries, multicultural, multi-ethnicity, multi-religious as well. And if you come to the borders together, you will find that this border actually does not exist on the, for a demographic and for how you will find the same ethnicities, group, tribes crossing these borders. And for Sudan itself, that gives Sudan a different view, because Sudan is not only connected to these countries in the Horn of Africa as well. There is Chad, Egypt, and if you can look at Central Africa. South Sudan, most likely people can consider it as part of Horn of Africa historically, because it's tied to Ethiopia as well, and it's tied to Sudan. This is the major border for South Sudan. its economical activities connected with this Horn of Africa, because one of the things that also binds these countries, the Red Sea as well, and the security of this Red Sea, as all of these countries actually heading the Aden Gulf and the Red Sea. If we look at the confederation between these countries, because if we find that these states during the nation building face many not obstacle, let us threats, and we find out of a number of states. We got Eritrea now is born after the independence of Ethiopia in 1990, something like this. Even Eritrea, for a long time, for Eritrean, it considered colonization, not being in a confederation with Ethiopia, because during even it was getting worse during the dark times when Mengistu was in the power. And if we look at South Sudan now, it came out of Sudan. If we look to Somaliland, whatever the situation of Somaliland, so there is a dynamic shaping of the countries among this Horn of Africa. If we look now at the Tigray region war, civil war inside Ethiopia, and how things isolating now in Ethiopia, this is also might lead us to more fragmentation of these states in these countries. To come out of this collapse of status and to have a progressive vision and strategic vision for how we can live together all on this region, we should put the integration among these countries as a strategic goal for any answer for the question of nation building and state building as well.
State building.
Because central state never work on all of these countries far away. We should move to a model of inclusive state where development should be raised, democratization of the political life, as well justice and human rights. This is issues that, as Bakri said, if we count the people that lost in these civil wars among these countries, going to be like 15 after the post-colonial era. And we should know, always saying, though you cannot say Ethiopia being colonized officially, but the state in Ethiopia, the modern state in Ethiopia, it is just part of the phenomena of the post-colonial state. It's been affected by all of the disease of the post-colonial state. So to look of the independence, the liberation of the people in this region, and to have the will and actually the best opportunity for them to develop this, they should develop together. Otherwise, instead of civil war, soon we'll find a regional war among these countries. And this is very serious.
And already started.
Yeah, we should have the wisdom to address our interests in a different model. We must think differently. I want to do something. There is a dramatic change happening after Saddam invaded Kuwait in Arab League. And we see now how they are living troubled and how the collapses actually spread after that change after 1990 in the second Gulf War. Here, we've been in war for long times, and we got our lesson. We should be careful that to have a peace to be sustained, and we should address our issues in a different way. And that's the real challenge for all of these countries. All of these countries, I do believe, are in transitional. We're always saying this, political status.
Yeah.
Ethiopia in transitional status. Now in Sudan, after the great revolution we had, we are in transitional status. Eritrea for a long time in transitional status after its independence, by the way. And this is the same for South Sudan, the same for Somalia, and all these countries.
Yes, I remember. Now, having said Somalia, about Somalia, yes, to Professor Bakri Jack. Professor Bakri Jack is specialized in political science and international affairs. It's very important. One of the elements or the new dimensions which in the whole of Africa, which I think also aggravated the situation of the already unstable part of the world, this Horn of Africa, is that some of the nationals, the young nationals of these in these countries, especially Somalia, they had it studied in some Arabic countries and maybe in other Asian countries where they got the Islamic, the jihadi Islamic movement. They were in touch with this, and when they went back to Somalia, for example, they created the whole upheaval, which still now is going on. Do you agree that this is in Somalia, what happening in Somalia is something related to the people coming, or these students coming from these countries?
Let me just go back. I'm going to answer your question. I think definitely, of course, bringing in some ideology to change your society and use it as a way to advance some specific political agendas could be used as a factor to explain why now we have elements of jihadi war in Somalia, and Somalia is not unique in this aspect to this. If you are following now, we have something called Qaeda in West Africa, and even in a country like Burkina Faso.
Boko Haram.
So Boko Haram. So I think you cannot really just say it's just because Somali youth decided to go and study in Arab countries and they brought back the political Islamist agenda. Historically, Somalia has always been connected to the Arab League. I mean, they are members of the Arab League, and they are very close to Yemen, and probably the second spoken language in Somalia after Somali is which is something people don't know. In Somalia, there is one language. There are so many clans, but everybody speaks the same language with different dialect. But they speak Arabic. The few chances I had to work with Somali in different refugee camps, many of them understand Arabic. So you could point to that as a factor, but by no means it's the only factor, and it cannot be used as a way to explain why Somalia is failing as a country. I think Mohammed pointed something really interesting. These countries, all of these countries have been in the process of nation building and state building, and they have been in transition. And as we say, if success is contagious, failure is contagious. I think there is one thing that you could point to. State failure is not something unique to Somalia. Sudan has been, for many years, classified as a failed state, and now people are talking about Ethiopia is a failed state. And I think you can go to country by country. If you take the criteria and the definition of what constitutes a failed state, I think you might find the exact same elements in each one of them. So failure is contagious, success is contagious. And beyond that, we are connected. So I think Mohammed's idea of thinking beyond these political borders and trying to really have an inclusive vision for the region is probably the way forward. But let me add, there is something really unique that's going on in this area. I recently looked into like a report that is developed by the, I think, different population council and groups. Africa as a continent is considered one of the youngest continents on the planet as we speak. By that I mean, if you have 60 to 65%, I have to point, data is not really reliable in a lot of African countries, but this is the estimate. 60 to 65% of the African population are between 15 and 40. This is something absolutely new. Demographic factors are among the things that you wouldn't know how they behave because you haven't seen it. It's not something that you can predict what they would do. And I think we see this in Sudan. If anyone wants to study what happened in Sudan in the last 2 years, this revolution, as great as it is, beyond the political action, you want to look at it from a different perspective, you cannot rule out the fact that we have a lot of young people between 15 and 40, and that contributed to the question of what is the future. So imagine if you add 44 million in Sudan to 130 million in Ethiopia to 4 million in Eritrea, and you add to look at this area, we're talking about 250 million people.
250 million, yeah.
And many of them are young. So they really need a different future. They cannot wait for what my father found or your father found. It used to be a different system. It used to be a sort of hierarchy. You go to school, you get certain entitlements. These things now are really different. Even going to school doesn't even give you entitlement. We have a lot of graduates from universities don't have jobs. In Sudan, in Ethiopia, you can find this everywhere. So the question of the future is going to really be begging and knocking on everybody's door. This traditional way of thinking about every country could look into itself and fix it, it's not going to happen, because what we did in the past, instead of thinking about contagious success, we actually all bought into failing each other. Sudan hosted Ethiopian opposition. Ethiopia hosted Sudanese opposition. This is during the SPLM being supported by Mengistu, and then at that time Sudan was supporting the TPLF, which ruled, and also the Eritrean revolution at some point. Same thing happened between Somalia and Ethiopia. So we tried the system of trying to destabilize each other. I think we came to the end of this political attempt, and maybe now we need to heed the lesson and look into ourselves and say, can we try something different? And I think that is really the moment for us to ask this question, and also keep the demographic factor in our horizon, because you don't know how it's going to behave. No one knows. If you have such a young population in one area without any prospect of a future, you don't know what they would do. Immigration is no longer a solution.
Yeah.
Going out finding a job is no longer a solution. We have to find something here. And I think that is a 20, 30 years question for all of us.
Okay, Professor. But if we go, this is a very interesting point that both of you share the same idea that there should be something new to address the issue of the Horn of Africa based on the different diversities. But who is supposed to draw the lines, and who is supposed to design a new ideal system that can incorporate and it can address the issue of these different diversities? I agree with you. That's now something new, that we are talking about different people. We are not talking about the same people we used to look. As you mentioned also in Sudan, here the revolution, now people are really amazed by the youth. Very young people, those who died, they were killed in the revolution, they were very young. Till this moment, these people, these young revolutionaries are still a big problem to those who want to rule the old way. They still are people. Okay, Muhammad Farouk, what can you add to it? Who is going to design this new future, as pointed out by Professor Bakri Jack?
I guess this should be a joint effort from all of the elite and intellectual and even the political class.
Who can?
Whatever.
Okay, so let's interrupt.
In the region.
Do you think that the first word, the international community, can it help in this? Because there's somebody it needs some steerer, some.
I always think international community can play a role, can help you as far as you can do something for your own, but cannot start for you anything. Sometimes even the business of aid itself, it should be how one of the feature of the failed state as well, because if you're going to be depending on what the international community or who's the international community, we should be part of it, by the way. And this is why we should look at the Horn of Africa when we look at it as strong and integrated with each other as a bloc, as you can see that there is a nation tiger, there is a Caribbean economic, and you can see the EU now started from earlier until they reached this union. We can start something. Let us not talk about the whole continent of Africa, but now, because of the crisis we are facing in these countries, we can start something together. I do believe Sudan itself, after this revolution, also can play a role. If we look back for how Sudan even affect the region and the area during the Islamic model of the previous regime, Sudan was being an agent of instability among Eritrea, among Ethiopia as well, and among the Arab League, Gulf, Egypt, being accused by this attempt of assassination of Hosni Mubarak, the previous president of Egypt. If you look at all of these roles, of all of this kind of doing politics in the old days, and how those people now here, and this I do believe is the same, if you can see how it things now in Ethiopia, and how it was Ethiopian as well, looking so optimistic when Abiy Ahmed came, and because of how Desalegn resigned in a critical moment, while the same demonstration was there, and there was a non-violence revolution in Ethiopia against the federal government, by the way. There is many problems that the Selina resigned at a moment, and Abiy Ahmed came, and people think that there will be a national consensus among Ethiopia around the guy, but unfortunately things went the wrong direction, the opposite direction at all. There is a gang. If you look at these masses of these young generations, they are exposed, by the way. Even if we said young generation, we are not talking just about people unknowledge or with people not educated. Because of how is aware now, because of they have the phones, they are connected with all the idea and thought, and they know everything that even you cannot say. And you see how it is difficult for us in Sudan here to stabilize the transitional authority that to be connected with people or the masses that they brought it. So I do think we should work on big perspective to contain all of those populations among this region of Horn of Africa. Sudan could play a big role. I think even if we look at the natural extension of the Horn of Africa, the IGAD countries, I think Dr. Hamdok now is the chairperson on this term for the IGAD itself. And I do believe he's so qualified to do a great role in even stabilization in Ethiopia is very essential. People now seeing that if we look at Ethiopia nowadays, it's open for every possibilities because
all probabilities.
Yep, yeah, that TDF now expand in many areas. They retain all of the land that even Abiy Ahmed people call not to go for this war and try to adopt a political solution. He enforced the law that the operation he named last year, and that was a big, I think, failure for the guy who won the Nobel Prize among the role he played from his start, and he launched his presidential with a lot of hopes for many, even in us for Sudan. He played a role in bringing down the stalemate happening in the first of the Sudanese revolution, stop the war with Eritrea. Eritrea is still, by the way, we should address the issue of Eritrea because I think there are many issues that raised now from how they feel unsafe, how they feel that for the less number of population, they feel that they could be attacked, and there is many, even this was the first war in 1990s between Ethiopia and Eritrea in the region of Padme, that also actually raised their fears regarding their neighborhood. So this all cannot address unless we feel that we are for all together, as Bakr said.
Yes, but what I have a very, now I remember something very, very interesting about the conflict now, the conflict between Sudan, Egypt, and Ethiopia on the issue of the GERD, Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. Some people, they say that this could have been a point of cohesion and coherence instead of being repulsion by creating some kind of economic integration block, economic integration. As you know, by the Renaissance Dam, Sudan will benefit and the agriculture will increase. Agricultural product, and people employed for agriculture can involve Ethiopians or Egyptians. So can this kind of integration, this economic integration like that of the GERD, which is supposed to be, can be the starting point for what you are advocating for, that to have some kind of can this economic integration be a starting point?
The shortest answer is yes, but let me problematize your statement in a little bit, which is along the line of what Mohammed said. So the idea of different future or thinking about a different way to approach these issues doesn't mean that we have to run away from our own issues. I think we have a unique challenge. By that I mean we are building a nation state when in fact the nation state as an idea run its course. So if you really think about what's happening with the European Union, what's happening even in Latin America, in a lot of places around the globe now, people are thinking the nature of economic development, this globalized world, even the idea of basic investments logic. Think about this. I'll give you a quick example. If you have a communication company planning to come to a country like Eritrea or Sudan, The main reasons why you would like a country to come and do something like that, it's population size, markets. So markets is a big incentive. One of the main reasons for why FDI, foreign direct investments, goes from one country to another, of course, in addition to the investment climate, banking, and the rate of return, also are there future markets. So in a way, I think we have a very difficult challenge and unique one, but it's doable, that we need to still look into ourselves. I don't think you can, even Sudan, I agree with Mohammed, we are in a unique position to help, but we can't really go and try to bring these countries together if we can't even respect each other. So we need to start thinking about how can we create a decentralized system that would reflect all people in Sudan. And you go to, I was joking with Mohammed earlier that I said we went to Jamhuriyat Mbadda because it feels almost like outside of this part of, not, this is in Khartoum, I'm not even talking about outside of Khartoum. It looks like a different republic to me, Mbadda Republic. So if we can't even reflect this in our own country, I don't think we can do this in the region. So what we really need to do is a dual assignment. Continue nation building and also understand, even when we build the nations, the idea of nation state is no longer a solution. What does that mean? It means we need a frog leaping. We need a really quite different thinking, and I think he called it design. I like the word design because that's a kind of imagination we really need, is how do we build this state that would be decentralized, inclusive, bring everybody in, but also understand it shouldn't be this political border. It should be how do we work together. And that is a good way to get into your answer to your question. Collaboration and economic cooperation. I don't think there's an alternative. I think we might, I lived in the States a long time, and one of the things that one of the common phrases that I heard a lot is that Americans do everything wrong. They do something right after they do everything wrong. I think we are following the same path. I hope we don't do many mistakes. We could use this, the GERD as I know I read a lot of studies about what the dam is good for Sudan, bad for Sudan, good for Egypt, bad for Egypt. But I know one thing, there is no conclusive evidence to suggest that we cannot work this out in terms of building and managing and making sure that everybody benefit. If we come to the thinking outside this idea of even we don't have this nation state, out of this idea, it's just for me, because even if you think of for yourself, in this globalized climate change and all challenges, you can't really think of, I mean, at this point, I drive a car in New York, I affect somebody living in Malawi. And that person in Malawi could not control their destiny. If we really don't think that big, we will be repeating those mistakes and think small and think about this national interest without thinking, actually you can't serve your national interest without thinking about the global interest. Yeah. It's not the other way around. So I think in terms of possibility, it is doable, it's a yes, and we can use the dam as a project to say, or even this, what's happening in Feshaga. Okay, I'm not against the idea that Sudan should have the right on its own land. I understand the history of the area. But if you get the land, and I happen to be living in Eritrea during the war between Eritrea and Ethiopia, I was there, and I have seen, actually I was right in Massawa when the Ethiopian airplanes struck the port, not literally 500 meters away from it. And I have seen the miseries that wars actually create for these countries. I've seen people being fleeing from Eritrea and being returned from Ethiopia, and they lost their belongings. And I have seen Ethiopian pushed out of Eritrea and they lost their belongings. I don't think if anyone is going to write the history today would say anyone won the war. You might have won a piece of land, but you lost a lot of lives. You destabilized the country. And imagine 15 years of economic development that could have been somewhere. Imagine the effort that put in wars. So I think if we get out of this idea of everything is, we have to get it the traditional way, we can sit down on the table and start thinking about how do we build our own nations, our own states, but also in collaborative, inclusive
with
manner.
others. Okay, that is yes, this is answered. Actually, my question is answered it because it could be, this is just an example. It could be one example, but you are elaborated this in a different way, that we have first to start building our own country with some outlets and to the others, so that it can incorporate such projects trans-border projects, we can call it. Okay, so Engineer Mohammed Farouk Salman. Okay, I think what the professor is he mentioned very important point to my question about the one of the ways. I did not say all the way. This is one of the ways to start by this kind of integration. But he mentioned that this can be done, but after we qualify ourselves first,
Or
like in
while we
Sudan.
are qualifying myself. I have this discussion 2 days ago with one of my friends, Canadian friends, that we have been seeing that if we can define the political status among these region, as we said, is transitional. And by the way, this is applied among many countries around us. All the belt of Sudan now is a transitional. If you look at Chad after the death of late
Assassination of
Dibbi,
Dibbi.
Egypt is as well, by the way, because even the constitution made in a special made for Sisi, not lasting, because they are considering it as a matter of
Transitional.
building the base for the state for the future of it. So it's a transitional as well. But if we are talking about the integration, and if we are talking about having a common commitment with each other, how this could be binding while we have a transitional political status, not an elected or not a legitimated power or a powerful government among these countries. And I do believe we cannot have this is stability unless we think together on the integration as well. It is one of the incentives for this transition to success, by the way. Otherwise, it will be threatened, it will be collapse, and we shall only fail the failure, not the success. So I do believe not even the project of the grid dams only, by the way, because you are talking about something that might affect something that could be made. The mega projects, this is the man made out of technology and using all of this, and most of this is fears and nonsense speaking about the collapse of the dam and many things. I remember what Dr. Farouk Al-Bas said when someone tell him that, is there any possibility of that? For sure there's a possibility. And for sure, we are engineers, you know, there could be a lot of measurement for safety could be made. There should be like an spillway or escape banks among Rusairis Dam. They should be designed, anything, just like in Toshki, like on the high
Dam.
dams. This all could be made. There's no problem or doubt about this. But to have such mega projects, unless you have a political maturity, a good governance, this is going to turn on a conflict by itself, by the way. Because if we talk about all the challenges that we are facing, and this is needed development and need to work on a mega projects for power generation, not only the great dams, for agriculture cultivation. If you look at even this area of Fishaga, you can find people came from Darfur, like 1,000 kilometers far from this area, and there is a people only a few kilometers close to this area. They don't have the same right that those they have.
Okay.
These things should be discussed on a different way. Instead of being blocking each other, competing each other in a very limited resources, as we imagine, these resources could be actually so rich, because I don't believe, this is, I guess, we're always talking about this Horn of Africa. It's a land for all civilization among this Africa, by the, if you look to the Aksum, Kush, and even the Pharaoh in Egypt as well, and the Nuba and earlier kingdoms. This is being, and this is a historical, a very simple rule. Where people live is an area of rich resources. You cannot build a city on Sahara or something like this. Where people are living, this is an area where it is suitable, rich of resources, and something like this. There is a challenge now because the population is not the same, but for sure, the tools that you can maximize these resources and benefit from it better than killing each other in a different way, that's very important. I'm afraid that unless we just think that even in the transition, we should be committed for an integrated many, because we need this, by the way. Let me tell you something. If we talk about the disease, they can't cross the border. For us, IGAD was initiative to fight the crop attack by. So it made among many countries, because these flies, they don't, they don't
Good.
need a visa to come to your country. And so your quality control for imported and for medication and for everything should be the same, because we are living on the same corner of the planet. So we have to arrange many things together, because the control that we need is the same. To control diseases is something we all should do together. Even for the trade, the custom, if we did not unify this custom, there is going to be a very bad opportunity for smuggling among these countries. And instead of having an opportunity for doing business together, it's going to be something to corrupt state
business.
rather than other.
Okay, Professor Mohammed Farouk has mentioned many good points, but I want to ask you a question about it. I think it's really something weird. There is international presence in this Horn of Africa, and maybe these days unprecedented presence. Name it, the big countries. I don't want to mention names. That they are actually, especially in Djibouti. So there is why they did not think of building these nations. Now we know that in Sudan, people were genuine. The international community definitely was genuine in its assistance, giving Sudan a helping hand, definitely, beyond doubt. These people in a record time, putting Sudan in the HIPIC program, the HIPIC initiative, starting some assistance, all of this. But why in the Horn of Africa? These countries, we all agree that the Horn of Africa, they need a lot of work to be done to qualify them, these countries, for growth. Why the international community is not paying attention to what you said about the countries? These countries are very rich countries in all aspects, but yet rich, potentially rich, but not physically or actually rich. Why the international community is not doing enough, other than their presence, their military presence?
I think I might start with questioning the premise of your question, if the international community is not doing enough. I think I like to start by saying maybe they could do more. Maybe one thing that we could also take into account is I happen to be coming from the school of thought that you control your destiny. I know for many years I have been talking to a lot of people, and always people think, oh, the United States is going to do this or that. And even before the revolution, I used to talk to political leaders in this country, and I say, what are you planning to do? And they would tell, like, what Americans are going to do? And I say, and I think you have been living in the States, maybe a wild guess I can make, 70% of American people probably don't even know Sudan exists as a country.
Yes.
And probably 70%, that's a fact actually, 70% don't even know if Africa is a continent or a country. So this idea that we have in this region, that the international community know everything about us and they are planning and they are supposed to come and help, I think this is an overestimated assumption about what the international community could do to us. So I think maybe the right way to ask the question is, have we done enough?
But why are they present? Okay.
They are present because one thing that you and I could agree on, in this globalized world, countries are going to look after their interest. This part of the Horn of Africa is covering a very important trade area. So it's by definition, if you want to maintain an international trading system, that is, I can give you an example. The last year estimates 2.3 trillion. This is the amount of trade around the globe. I think about what I remember looking at, 700 billion of that goes around this area. So it's not, we might be living in that area, but if we're crazy enough to become pirate, like what happened in Somalia, somebody is going to stop us because they wanted ships to keep going. So they have to have presence, and that is justified by the mere definition of maintaining international security for trading. So they have presence, maybe they have been intervening. The question is, are they doing the right things? Are they doing enough? Are they actually understanding these issues? And I think understanding these issues is a responsibility, but it's also a responsibility because we talk to them. As we speak, you point out to something about what Sudan is going through with the HEPIC initiative, the economic reforms that's going on. But I can tell you, Sudanese people do control their destiny, and they could say what we want and what we don't want. We don't have to say yes to everything. And I think that is what we need to come to. I always say this idea of sovereignty, this idea of sovereign nation is controlling its destiny and not being affected by any other countries is a myth. No country is immune to influence. United States wake up every morning, they analyze their strategic position and what China is doing. So you might have weapons, but you can't fight everything with weapons. You need to fight with other means. So I think we need to start developing that kind of thinking in this region for us. Instead of blaming the international community for not doing enough, maybe we can say, what can we do to educate the international community for understanding what they can do, and even what they are doing, we can choose to say, we want you to intervene here, instead of telling us where to go. So in the spirit of responding to your question directly, I would like to maybe say, we can ask, we can say, what do we want the international community to do for us? I don't think we have a clear answer.
No answer.
I don't think we know even what we want.
We're not ready yet.
Yeah.
Can you add to it? Because he said, now we have about 5 minutes to go, but what he mentioned that, yes, the international community is not to blame. In nutshell, I say he is not to blame because we are not qualified and we are not prepared to point out to them what they can do. Of course, they will look for their interest. So about the international community and about why the international community did not respond positively to the request of Sudan and Egypt on the issue of the GERD. When they took it to the United Nations Security Council, just rhetoric, few words, and from the beginning, do you think that it is wrong? It was a wrong decision to take it to the Security Council?
Yeah, I think so, frankly. And even I'm not, to be frank also, I'm not satisfied with how the international community act with the Sudan revolution, by the way. Actually, we've been being blunted for what the NIF regime did in Sudan, while we are those who get rid of it, not the international community. But this is another issue. If we talk, Sudan, by the way, the position of Sudan not to take the case of grid to National Security Council. That was Egypt. Sudan want to be under the African Union, but with a specialist and
so that's what
from
Egypt stands.
Fully that want to take it there. But Sudanese, I think the position of Sudan was, to negotiation to be under the
AU, African Union.
Localized,
in the African Union, AU, and to be actually with the witnesses from the national security and other countries that could give us support for this negotiation. And I don't think for this is variation, as Bakri said to you. This is a good example for how, because it's not the will of Sudan or the will of Egypt. Also, Ethiopia is part of this negotiation, so they just cannot agree on what Sudan want or what Egypt want and dismiss what Ethiopia wants. This is something, the best way to deal with it is to work on it together, the three countries. And by the way, at the start, we talked about this earlier. For Minister Nawi, when he started this project, he asked for to be owned by the three countries, by the way, and to be run by the three countries. And this is model should be put again in the table.
That's why from the beginning I said that
because if you look at
it
now
could be a starting point. Okay, because if you're short of time, we want Professor Bakri Jack to conclude by this issue of the GERD. Can it be a starting point for integration rather than probability of war or conflict, which will hard hit Sudan and Ethiopia if we go in war about the GERD? So can you conclude in 1 minute?
I can do it in less than 1 minute. I think the possibility is there, and I think it's the right thing to do, and I think we will do it after we do the wrong things. I don't think any of these countries are interested in going for war. I don't think anybody wanted to lose young people in fighting for. And I also think it's a logical, reasonable conclusion to start thinking the dam is built. It is there, okay? even if we have objections on certain mechanisms of how it's built, I think the issue of how to manage it in the future, we can put something back on the table of saying, realities are damaged there, and it's going to function. Can we make sure that it is run in a way that would maintain the interests of the three countries? And I think we will come to that, but maybe after long, cunning ways and wasted talks and negotiations. But that seems to be the final thing.
Thank you very much. Thank you, dear viewers, for being with us the last 1 hour or so. I'm very happy and to have to host in this episode one of our distinguished professors in America, and definitely we'll meet before you leave, before you go back. We have to see you again on a different issue, but we are very proud to have Professor Bakri Jack. It's been in America long. What's the name?
Long Island University,
Long Island University
in Brooklyn.
In Brooklyn, in New York, and he will be back to America also. And our engineer Mohammed Farouk Salman is also very active in the political activities these days. So Professor Bakri will have you again. I think we'll promise the viewers that we'll see you again because it's important before you leave, we must meet again. Thank you, dear viewers, for being with us in this hour. Hope to see you next week on the same issue or a different issue if things develop. Bye.